If you had seen us that day, me standing on the front porch with a tin of oatmeal cookies in my hands, smiling like I still mattered, and my son Caleb beside me with his arm around my shoulder, saying, "Of course you're moving in, Mom. We want you close to us now," you would have thought it was the beginning of something tender. It wasn't. It was the start of a story I never thought I'd be telling at nearly 70. A revenge story, not of fire or fury, but one where silence was my sword, and the truth my only ally. When my husband died, the house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by his things. His worn-out chair still had the imprint of his back. The record player still had that scratchy John Denver vinyl queued up, like he'd return any moment to hum along. But he didn't. Winfred was a quiet man, railroad dispatcher for over 30 years. He never missed a beat, never raised his voice. And I was the softness in the home he made steady. I baked, gardened, told bedtime stories until my voice cracked, kissed scrapes on the knees of our 2 kids, Caleb and Freya, and did all the things mothers do thinking, they'll remember this, thinking it would matter someday. After Winfred passed, Sundays stretched like old chewing gum. Flavorless, endless. Caleb would stop by once a week, polite, distracted, like someone checking in on an elderly neighbor, not his own mother. And when he said, "Mom, why don't you sell the house and come live with us?" I didn't think twice. I should have. I wanted warmth. What I got was erasure. "I'll help you list the house," Caleb offered, already flipping through Zillow on his phone like it was a done deal. "I know someone who can help with the paperwork," Bella chimed in, my daughter-in-law, always smiling just a little too tightly, like she was acting in a commercial she didn't audition for. "We'll find a place that fits all of us. You, me, Bella, Lila. It'll be perfect." They made it sound like home, so I signed the papers, handed over the proceeds of my home, $480,000, and added my small savings. Caleb said it would make the mortgage easier. I wanted to believe it would make me easier to love again. They found a 2-story house with a yard and a basement in Pomona. Caleb handled the details, Bella decorated like it was her HGTV pilot, and I got a small bedroom off the kitchen. "Easy for you, Mom, no stairs. Closer to the kettle." That first week, I baked cinnamon rolls. Lila, my 15-year-old granddaughter, hugged me and said they tasted like childhood. Bella even said, "These are divine, Eleanor. You'll make this house feel warm." I thought, maybe I'm not a burden. Maybe I'm still part of something. But love, when conditional, decays fast. The second week, Bella reorganized the kitchen. My cookbooks disappeared. Not enough space. The mantel I'd carefully decorated with my porcelain figurines was stripped. They don't match the aesthetic. One by one, I was boxed away just like my things. Caleb, he didn't see it, or didn't want to. He'd walk in from work, kiss Bella on the cheek, nod at me like I was another piece of furniture. And Lila? Her once bright eyes started to dim when she looked at me. I could hear Bella whispering through the door, "Grandma's habits are weird, aren't they? She still watches DVDs. Can you believe that?" And teenage ears soak in shame fast. Still, I stayed silent. It's just adjustment, I told myself. They're busy. I just have to earn my place here. I started vacuuming when no one was home, stopped watching TV after 9 p.m., didn't cook anything that might smell up the curtains. I shrank myself until I fit. But shrinking never makes you safer. It makes you invisible. They never outright said it. But I knew I was no longer family. I was a shadow that happened to pay for the roof. Yet I never asked for thanks. Not once. I just wanted space to breathe and someone to remember I used to be the reason dinner was warm and birthdays had meaning. That winter, I found a dried rose in my drawer. It was from Winfred. He used to leave them on the windowsill every February 14th. I held it in my hands, brittle and brown, and thought, even something that's forgotten still carries proof that it bloomed once. I didn't know then that my son was planning to make me disappear entirely, on paper, in signature, in legal standing. But I was about to learn, and they were about to find out. You don't bury the woman who planted every root you're standing on, without the earth shifting beneath you. The strange thing is, when people begin to erase you, they rarely shout it. They don't slam doors or scream. They reorganize a drawer. They move your teacup. They act like you're not in the room, even when you are. And one day, you realize you've been slowly edited out of the family photo, one pixel at a time. The first shift came quiet, but sharp. It was a Sunday morning, the kind Winfred and I used to cherish. Early sunlight, the smell of bacon, church music humming in the background. I came downstairs with a warm tray of banana muffins, wearing the soft blue cardigan Caleb had given me for my birthday years ago. Bella was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while sipping green juice from a glass too tall for a normal human hand. She barely looked up. "Oh, Eleanor, that sweater," she said, eyebrows rising slightly. "What about it?" She tilted her head like a stylist evaluating a bargain bin mannequin. "It just makes you look tired. Maybe go for cooler tones? For your skin tone?" I laughed lightly. Winfred always said I looked like spring in this color. Bella smiled with her mouth only. Times change. That was how it started. Tiny cracks that didn't feel like cracks until the weight of them split you open. Next came the kitchen, my sanctuary. One day, I went to pull out my old pie dish. Gone. Then my handwritten recipe cards, tucked away in a box, placed behind the laundry detergent in the garage. "Bella," I said carefully, "did you move my things?" "Oh, yes," she chirped. "We just needed more space. Hope that's okay." It wasn't, but I said it was. Because I didn't want to be the nagging mother-in-law, because I still believed if I just adjusted, I'd be welcomed back in. The guest rule came next. "We're trying to keep the house a bit quieter," Bella said, setting down her wine glass after dinner one Thursday. "So just for now, maybe hold off on having the ladies from your book club over." I blinked. "I only invited them once a month." She smiled apologetically. "Exactly, and Lila's schedule is so intense lately. Teenagers need structure, less distraction. Lila, who used to sit at my feet while I read her Charlotte's Web. Lila, who now barely said goodnight anymore. And then there was the thermostat war. "Please don't touch it, Mom," Caleb said one night, like a teacher scolding a child. "The heating bill's through the roof." "I was cold," I said, holding my arms. "Well, maybe put on a thicker robe," Bella chimed in, her tone sweet, but laced with static. "Have you ever been asked to justify your own warmth? If you're watching this right now, maybe you've been there. Maybe not in a basement like I was later, but somewhere where your presence was treated like an expense. If that resonates, just let me know in the comments. I read every one." But back to that winter. My room became the only place I didn't feel like an inconvenience. I stopped baking, stopped inviting anyone over. I barely made a sound after 9 p.m., not even the TV, because apparently the volume disturbed Lila's focus. I began drinking my tea lukewarm in the evenings just to avoid using the microwave. I was still paying for the roof over our heads, but I was no longer welcome under it. Caleb's changes were slower. He didn't criticize. He omitted. He stopped asking if I wanted to go with him to the grocery store like he used to. He stopped sharing updates from work. He started coming home later and later. I once asked him if he wanted to have lunch, just the two of us. "I'm slammed, Mom," he said. "Bella and I are doing intermittent fasting anyway." It was in early February when I truly felt myself shrink. There was a small dinner. A coworker of Caleb's and his wife came over. I baked lasagna, set the table with the wedding china I'd passed down to Bella. When I came out wearing a neat olive dress and my wedding earrings, Bella looked startled. "Oh, I thought you were just going to stay in tonight." "Why would I?" She hesitated. "I just thought it might be nice to let us handle the hosting. You've had a long week." A long week of folding towels and pretending not to exist. I sat in my room and heard them laugh without me. The final straw for me was the photo. On the living room mantel was a new family portrait. Caleb, Bella, and Lila, taken in a meadow, all matching in white. I wasn't in it. There was space on the left side of the frame, plenty of space where I could have been. And yet, I didn't cry right then. I just looked at that photograph and realized I hadn't just given them my money. I had handed over my place, and they'd decided I wasn't even worth the corner of a frame. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet scraping of a nameplate being removed from a bedroom door, or the absence of your face on a mantle you helped build. And I thought, if they can forget me this easily, what else are they capable of? I didn't know then just how far Caleb was willing to go. But the silence? It was starting to speak volumes. Birthdays used to mean something in our house. Winfred always left a yellow rose on the nightstand before I woke up. My kids would make coffee and cinnamon toast, badly but lovingly, and I'd wear my blue silk scarf, the one with the tiny daisies like it was a crown. 69 birthdays had come and gone. This one felt different before it even started. The morning of my 70th, no one said a word, not Caleb, not Bella. Lila barely looked up from her phone on the way to school. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the steam from my tea curling quietly in the air. I had even made breakfast, for them, my apple cinnamon muffins, the ones Caleb used to sneak two of as a teenager. He walked past them like they weren't there, not even a happy birthday, Mom. And I told myself, maybe they forgot. People forget things when they're busy. Or maybe they were planning a surprise. At 2 p.m., I started baking again, not for me, but for them. A roast, mashed potatoes, the pie they always requested on holidays. Maybe this was how they wanted to show love. Through a casual dinner where I pretended not to notice, the quiet hurt. By 5, the house was filled with warm smells. By 6, Bella came home from a grocery run with ready-made food. "Oh," she said, looking at the table I had set, the pie cooling on the rack. "You already cooked?" "Yes," I said, my voice hopeful. "I thought maybe—" She cut me off. "It's fine. More options are always good." She didn't even look me in the eye. I wore my olive green dress, the same one I wore at Caleb's high school graduation. He used to say it made me look like spring. Now, Bella looked me up and down and said, "Isn't that a bit much for dinner at home?" Then she smiled too brightly. "Anyway, before everyone gets here, could you check the basement heater? Mabel always complains it's chilly down there. We're planning to give the guests a quick wine cellar tour." I nodded, still holding on to hope. Maybe the guests are for me. The stairs to the basement were steep, dim, and smelled faintly of old carpet and lemon cleaner. I clutched the rail, stepping carefully down in my good shoes. The space heater was tucked in the corner beside Caleb's makeshift wine rack. I crouched, checked the plug, turned the dial. It hummed to life. Then, slam. The door at the top of the stairs shut so fast I jumped. I climbed 3 steps. "Bella?" I called out. The door swung shut. No answer. "Bella, the door locked." A pause. Then, her voice, muffled through the door. "I know." I stood there frozen. "What do you mean you know?" "It's better this way, Eleanor," she said, like she was explaining something to a child. "You don't want to be upstairs, really. The party isn't, well, it isn't for you." I swallowed hard. "It's my birthday." There was silence, then a little laugh. "Oh, is that why you're dressed up?" My knees wobbled. My hand gripped the railing. "You can't just lock me in here." "You'll be fine," she said, already fading from earshot. "There's a heater. We left you some water. We told everyone you went to visit a friend for the weekend, so just stay quiet. Don't yell. The music will drown out any noise anyway." And then she was gone. I stood there for a long time, not crying, not moving, just letting the cold truth settle in my chest like ice water. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had erased me. I sat down on an old camping chair in the corner. My hands shook, not just from the cold, but from rage, from the humiliation, from betrayal so deep it didn't even sting. It just emptied me. How could they do this? My son. The boy I raised with late-night lullabies and homemade Halloween costumes. The child who broke his arm falling from a tree I told him not to climb. But I stayed with him all night in the ER anyway. Now he left me in a basement like a sack of laundry. I fumbled in the pocket of my dress and felt my phone, still charged, still connected. And in that moment, clarity. I remembered the cameras, the ones I'd had Eliza's son install. They were motion triggered, linked to an app, discreetly placed around the house. Why? Because little things kept disappearing. A brooch, earrings, a perfume bottle, my diary. Every time they told me I was just getting forgetful, I wasn't. And now I would prove it. I opened the app. The screen split into 4 quadrants. Kitchen, living room, my bedroom, all active. All recording. The living room camera showed Caleb pouring wine. Bella was talking to Mabel and 2 other women I didn't recognize. I turned up the volume. "Thank God she's not here," Bella said, laughing. She'd just start talking about how she met her husband at a fairground in the 70s. 2 hours of carousel stories. They laughed. My story. The way Winfred and I met. To them, it was a joke. My breath hitched. My phone buzzed. A security notification. Motion detected, bedroom cam. I switched feeds. Caleb was in my room. He opened the top drawer of my dresser, pulled out a manila envelope, and handed it to Bella. "She's out of the way," he said. "Lila's upstairs. I told her to come down in 20. Just sign and we're done." "Think she'll do it?" Bella asked. "She's 15. We'll say it's school paperwork. No one will check." And that was when I understood. This wasn't just about locking me away for a night. This was about making me disappear for good. There's a moment when everything you've known collapses under you that isn't made of fire. It's not shouting or screaming. It's just quiet. A soundless moment where your heart recognizes that you've crossed over, that nothing will be the same again. That moment came for me at the bottom of a basement staircase, with my phone in one hand and my breath caught in my chest. The cameras had captured more than I could have imagined. Caleb, my son, rifling through my dresser. Bella whispering instructions, but the worst part wasn't their words. It wasn't even the forged documents. It was what they were using. My granddaughter. I switched to the hallway camera. Lila stood awkwardly outside my bedroom door, biting her lip. Bella approached her with a stack of papers and a pen. "It's just a school form," she said, her voice light like it was no big deal. "We need you to sign it since Grandma can't right now." Lila hesitated. "Why can't she?" "She's out of town." Caleb's voice came from behind. "She gave verbal permission. We just need a signature to send to the insurance company." They had practiced this. Their voices were calm, convincing. Professional manipulators in the comfort of their own living room. I watched my granddaughter, a child, sign a document with my name, not knowing what it meant, just trying to be helpful, obedient. I could barely breathe. I went to my email. It had been a while since I looked through it. I preferred phone calls and letters. The inbox was a mess. But deep in the spam folder, a name popped out. Freya, my daughter. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly 6 years. The last time we saw each other was after a fight, about her husband, about choices, about things that, looking back, probably weren't worth losing each other over. And yet, she'd written dozens of emails, each one unanswered, each one unseen. The first email was dated 5.5 years ago. "Hi, Mom. I know we haven't spoken since everything, but I miss you. Rufus misses you. I wish things had gone differently, but I need you to know we're okay, and I'd like you to be a part of our lives again." There were pictures of her, of a little boy with eyes like Winfred's, a grandson I never knew I had. They named him Jamie. He was 3 now. She'd sent birthday invitations, updates, letters just to say, "I'm thinking of you." All blocked, all intercepted. By Caleb, by Bella. It was like waking up underwater, a whole life I could have had, a whole love I was denied, not by distance, but by the people I lived with, the people I gave everything to. I kept reading. One letter stood out, sent 3 months ago. "Mom, I don't know if you read these, but I still hope you do. Jamie turned 3 today. He knows about you. I show him your picture and he calls you Grandma Ellie. He says he wants to meet you. So do I. Please, if you ever want to talk, I'll be here." I pressed my fingers to the screen. tracing her words like they were stitched into the fabric of me. I didn't know I was crying until the tears blurred the letters, and just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't some forgotten mother locked in a basement. I was a woman with a daughter, a grandson, a reason. I opened my bank app next. My fingers trembled as I typed in the password, Winfred's birthday and the last 4 digits of our old landline, 2,384. That was it. Gone were the $150,000 I had kept aside. Gone were the regular pension deposits. I scrolled through the statements, $3,000 here, $4,200 there, all labeled transfer to investment account. The name on the receiving end, Marden Family Fund, an account I never opened. And Caleb, he'd been listed as an authorized manager. There were notes. Home repair reimbursement, medical care supplement, monthly care fee. Care? I hadn't had a checkup in 2 years. And then I saw it. A document attached to one of the transfers. A scanned signature, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd taken my name, my trust, my identity. I closed the banking app and reopened the cameras. Back in the kitchen, Caleb was laughing with a guest. Bella held a wine glass in one hand and draped her other arm around him like the perfect suburban wife. To them, this was just another successful evening. To me, it was the night I found out how little I meant to the people I loved most. I opened Freya's last email. At the bottom, she'd included her phone number. I stared at it for a long time. What would I even say? Hi, it's Mom. You were right. I should have called. But I was too proud. And now I'm locked in a basement and your brother forged my signature. Would she answer? Would she believe me? I pressed the green dial button before I lost the courage. 1 ring, 2, 3. I almost hung up. Then, hello? Her voice was older, wiser, but still hers. Tolly? I whispered. It's Mom. A pause. A silence so sharp it cut the air. Then, Mom? Her voice cracked. Is it really you? Yes, I whispered. And I need your help. Freya came for me the next morning. No sirens, no police, no big drama, just a quiet knock on the basement door, and her voice. Older, steadier, a little tired, but unmistakably hers. Mom, I'm here. I've got you. And that was all it took. She had driven overnight from Oregon with her husband and their little boy, Jamie. I didn't get to hug him right away. There wasn't time. While Bella and Caleb were out dropping Lila at a friend's house and doing their usual Saturday errands, Freya helped me up the stairs, tucked me into the back seat of their car with a blanket, and we drove. Just drove. No one saw me leave. No one cared enough to look. That day, something shifted in me. Not just because I escaped, but because I stopped waiting to be rescued. I had saved myself. I had installed those cameras. I had gathered the bank statements. I had reached out. I had made the call. And now, for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be loved. I was choosing who was allowed to stay. We got to Freya's house around midnight. It was modest. A 2-bedroom ranch-style place with old oak trees leaning over the roof like they were guarding it. I was given the back room, clean sheets, a fresh toothbrush, and a little hand-drawn card sitting on the nightstand. I'm glad you're here, Grandma Ellie. Jamie. It was the first time I'd been called Grandma in years. I held the paper in my hands for a long time. I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears would come later. Right now, there was too much to do. Freya and I sat on the porch the next morning, bundled in sweaters, 2 mugs of coffee between us. We didn't talk about the past, not at first. Not about the fight, not about the years we'd lost. We just sat, letting the quiet wrap around us like a blanket. Then she said, I knew something was wrong. Caleb never told me you moved in with them. Every time I asked, he'd say you were busy or that you were traveling. Then the letter started coming back, unopened. I figured you were still mad at me. I never even saw them, I said. They blocked everything. I know now, she whispered. That's when I told her everything. The fake documents, the forged withdrawals, the manipulation, the money, and most of all, how they used Lila. Her jaw tightened. They committed fraud. We could go to the police right now. But I shook my head. No, not yet. Not like that. I didn't want noise. I wanted clarity. I didn't want a scandal. I wanted to reclaim what they thought they stole. Quietly. Fully. Legally. I wasn't going to fight fire with fire. I was going to smother them with truth. So that morning we got to work. Freya's husband, Rufus, used to work in IT before becoming a teacher. He helped me gather all my camera footage. He pulled it from the cloud, backed it up to a secure hard drive, and even made copies. We had time-stamped video of Caleb forging my signature, Bella coaching Lila to sign a fraudulent form, conversations between the two of them about keeping me quiet, financial records that didn't match my actual spending. That footage wasn't just evidence, it was proof of pattern. Freya reached out to a lawyer, an older woman named Iris, who specialized in elder financial abuse. She had kind eyes and a mind like a steel trap. "Do not worry," she said, flipping through the files. "I've seen worse, but rarely with this much documentation." "I don't want to sue them," I told her. She raised an eyebrow. "No? I want my name back, my money, my rights, and then I want to disappear from their world as quietly as they tried to erase me." She smiled. "That, Eleanor, is something I can help with." Over the next few weeks, Iris helped me. Revoke all power of attorney access Caleb had forged, file for the return of all stolen funds through the state's financial exploitation laws, secure a restraining order without even needing to step into a courtroom, begin the process of reclaiming the title to the house, the one I had paid for but never legally co-owned. And throughout it all, I stayed quiet. I didn't post anything. I didn't write. I didn't even tell Lila where I was. Not yet. I didn't want to drag her into the middle of a war. I just waited and watched and healed. Every morning, I helped Jamie with breakfast. We'd sit on the floor and build towers out of blocks. He'd say, "Grandma, look!" And I'd feel my chest stretch in ways I forgot it could. Every evening, I'd walk through Freya's little garden and feel the breeze on my face without needing anyone's permission. And every night, I'd fall asleep without earplugs, without fear, without guilt. I was not the same woman they had locked in a basement. I was not the ghost that haunted their house. I was not the wallet in the shape of a mother. I was Eleanor Ann Holloway, and I was back. Not to ruin them, but to reclaim myself. The letter arrived on a Thursday. It was printed on heavy cream paper, tucked inside a plain envelope with no return address. The header bore my full name, the one they had tried to erase. Eleanor Ann Holloway. Inside were just 2 sentences. Effective immediately, all powers of attorney and financial access granted to Caleb Holloway are null and void. Any further contact or attempts to access Eleanor Holloway's personal assets will result in criminal prosecution. Signed, notarized, filed. The silence that followed felt like the sun finally rising after a long winter. Caleb never saw it coming. According to Iris, the lawyer, he'd gone to the bank the day before to adjust some retirement funds. He'd smiled, worn his pressed shirt, tried to act like a man in control of things, but the teller handed him a notice instead, said the account was locked, that he was no longer listed, that further attempts could result in legal action, and for the first time in his life, my son didn't have an answer. Bella was next. She tried calling me. 7 times in a single afternoon. I didn't pick up. She emailed. Subject lines like, "Let's talk, Eleanor." We didn't mean it. "Lila misses you." But the messages weren't really about Lila. They were about control slipping through her fingers. They weren't sorry I left. They were sorry they couldn't finish the job. You might be wondering, did I ever want revenge? Did I ever want to expose them, humiliate them? The truth is, no. I didn't want chaos. I wanted freedom. And I got it. I didn't slam any doors. I just made sure they no longer had the keys. 2 weeks after the papers were delivered, I went back to the house. Not to move in, but to settle what was left. It was early morning. The sun hadn't fully risen. Freya came with me, but waited in the car. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It felt smaller than I remembered. The kitchen looked the same, but the warmth was gone. The air was colder, sharper, like the house itself was tired of pretending. On the counter was a grocery list in Bella's handwriting. Next to it, a chipped mug I used to drink from, now stained and forgotten. I didn't touch anything. I just walked room to room, making peace with each piece of me they'd tried to bury. My recipe box was still in the garage. My wedding photo was under a stack of old mail. A brooch I thought I'd lost was tucked in the back of a drawer. I took none of it. They'd already stolen the symbols, but I had taken back what mattered, my voice, my value, my name. At the end of the hallway, I saw it, my old bedroom door. The lock had been changed. A key was still in it. I turned it slowly. Inside, the room was empty, stripped bare, but on the wall, taped loosely above the light switch, was something that stopped me. A birthday card. It had fallen slightly, the edges curled. It was the one I made for Lila 2 years ago. She had saved it, hidden it here. I sat on the floor and stared at it for a long while. That's when I cried. Not for what I'd lost, but for the love that had tried, quietly, in secret, to survive. You know, people often ask me, what would you say to Caleb now if you had the chance? And if you're watching this, maybe you've been through something similar, someone taking you for granted until there's nothing left of you but silence. So tell me, what would you say? Drop it in the comments, or don't. Sometimes it's enough just to have someone ask. As for me, I don't have a speech. I don't need closure. I have a garden where I plant herbs with Jamie every Sunday. I have a room where Freya and I drink tea and talk about things we missed and things we're building now. I have my name on my own accounts. I have my breath again. Before I left the house for the last time, I walked to the front porch and looked out over the lawn. Caleb's car wasn't there. Bella's garden was dying, overwatered, root-bound, and neglected. She always liked the appearance of care more than the real thing. I slipped the house key into the mailbox. A simple note with it. Thank you for the lesson. I'm not yours to erase. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even close it hard. But the sound of it latching behind me, it was the loudest thing I'd ever done. Healing doesn't arrive like thunder. It doesn't knock on your door screaming, "You're whole again!" No, it's quiet, almost sneaky. It starts when you pour a second cup of coffee because you want to, not because someone else is waiting for it. It happens when you hear your own name and it finally feels like yours again. The week after I left the house for good, I started planting. Freya handed me a pair of old gardening gloves and pointed to a corner of the yard where sunlight poured in every morning like honey. "This was supposed to be tomatoes," she said, "but I think it needs something softer." So I planted herbs. Basil, thyme, mint. Not because I had to feed anyone. Not because I needed to be useful, but because I liked the smell of things growing. In the mornings, Jamie would run outside with a little plastic watering can, determined to soak every leaf, even the rocks. "Too much water," I'd say, laughing. "But they're thirsty," he'd protest, brow furrowed, with purpose. I'd nod and let him keep going. Because that's the thing about rebuilding. You have to let the next generation try, even if they overwater, even if they stumble. Just like I had. Freya didn't push me to talk. She let me move through the house like it was mine, which, emotionally, it was becoming. Sometimes we'd sit at night with a glass of wine or just warm tea, and she'd say, "Tell me about the first time you held Caleb." And I would. I'd tell her how I had cried harder than he did, how I sang to him in the hospital even though I was off key. And then, silence, because there was no need to say what came next. I don't know if it's possible to fully mourn someone who's still alive, but I did, quietly. Not because I missed Caleb as he was now, but because I remembered who he used to be. The boy who once saved a bird with a broken wing. The teenager who called me from college just to ask how to cook eggs, the way you do. I let myself grieve for him, and then I let him go. It was Freya who got the first text, from Bella. "She's completely cut us off. No calls, no nothing. What is she trying to prove?" A minute later, another. "You know she rewrote the will, right?" And then, "Lila's upset. Hope Grandma's proud of the mess she made." Freya didn't reply. She just handed me the phone. I read the words, then placed the phone face down on the table. "They still think it's about them," I said quietly. That night, I wrote a letter, not to send, just for me. "Dear Lila, one day you may understand why I left the way I did. I didn't disappear because I stopped loving you. I disappeared because I started loving myself again. I hope you grow up to recognize the sound of real kindness, not control dressed as care. I'll always be here, quietly cheering for you, even if you don't know it yet." I folded it, tucked it in my journal. Maybe someday she'll read it. Maybe she won't. Either way, I meant it. A few days later, I was walking through the local farmer's market with Freya and Jamie when I saw someone I hadn't expected, Miriam Lockhart. We taught at the same school once years ago, me in the library, her in math. She recognized me immediately. "Eleanor Holloway?" she gasped. "Is it really you?" I smiled. In the flesh. She didn't ask where I'd been. She just hugged me so tightly I felt my bones realign. "You look different," she said, studying my face. "Lighter. Like someone who finally put the heavy suitcase down." I nodded. "That's exactly what it feels like." We sat under the awning of a little pie shop and caught up. She told me about her daughter's wedding, her grandkids, the stray cat who adopted her porch. And then she asked, gently, "So, what are you doing now, Eleanor?" I paused, not because I didn't know, but because it was the first time someone asked with genuine interest, not out of gossip or pity. "I'm rebuilding," I said, "starting small. Herbs, letters, maybe even writing something for others someday." "You should," she said. "People would listen." That night, I started something. Not a book, just a short post for a quiet corner of the internet. It started like this. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to remind someone that you don't have to stay erased. Even if your name has been crossed out, you're still the author of what comes next." And surprisingly, people responded. A few strangers, a few old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. One woman messaged, "Your words reminded me to call my mom, thank you." And I realized my story didn't have to end in silence. It could begin again, not with noise, not with chaos, but with the small sound of a basil leaf unfurling in morning light, with the laughter of a boy who calls me Grandma Ellie, with the strength of a woman who survived and didn't need to shout it. Something shifted the day my story went public, not viral, not loud, just visible. It was a short post. I hadn't attached names, no photographs, no accusations, just a woman telling the truth. They thought I wouldn't speak. They thought erasing me would make me disappear, but I remembered who I was, and I wrote myself back in. I clicked post and shut my laptop. No fanfare, no big expectations. But within days, it had quietly reached hundreds, then thousands. It wasn't just my story anymore. Women wrote to me. Some said their kids stopped calling after they retired. Some had been locked out of their homes after giving just a little help on the down payment. Some were raising grandchildren while their names were forgotten in family group texts. They weren't asking for justice. They were asking, "Am I crazy for feeling like I mattered once?" And I told them, "No, sweetheart, you're not crazy. They just got too used to your love being free." Meanwhile, across town, the Holloway household began to rot. It started with the little things. Bella posted a birthday video for Lila on social media. The cake was beautiful, the table well lit, but the child in the video looked hollow. She barely smiled. Her eyes scanned the room like she was looking for someone who wasn't there, me. A neighbor sent me the video. I watched it with the volume low. Freya stood behind me. "She's not herself," she said. "That's not the Lila you knew." I nodded. "She's learning how to live in a house where affection has conditions." Caleb had changed too. I heard from Iris, the lawyer, that he tried to open a new line of credit in my name. Only this time, the system flagged it. A recorded phone call confirmed it. He said I'd given verbal permission before she left. The bank responded with a single question. "Where's the written authorization?" His answer was silence. They shut it down, reported it to the state. He wasn't just losing access to money, he was losing control. He sent an email next. One line only. "You really want to drag this through the mud?" I didn't answer, not because I was afraid, but because mud is only messy if you step in it. I wasn't stepping back into anything. One afternoon, a woman named Diane messaged me. She worked as a school counselor, knew Bella professionally. "Your granddaughter, she seems lost," she wrote. "I know I shouldn't get involved, but something about her keeps nudging me." I thanked her. I didn't ask for more. There's only so much you can do without dragging a child into a war she never asked for. Still, that night, I left the porch light on longer than usual. Maybe not for Lila to return, but to remind myself that my love for her hadn't dimmed. Only the access had changed. At home, things were growing. Jamie helped me set up an old typewriter Freya found at a thrift store. He loved the sound of the keys, said it sounded like grandma magic. I began writing more, small essays, letters, reflections. A local women's group invited me to read one at their gathering. I almost declined. But Freya said something that stuck with me. "You spent decades giving people a voice in the library. Now it's your turn to speak." So I went. I wore my nicest sweater, put on my mother's old brooch, and read a piece titled "The Room They Locked and the Door I Found." There was no applause, just stillness. Then someone stood, an older woman with silver hair and tired eyes. She said, "Thank you for saying what so many of us have swallowed." And then another, "They told me I was just being emotional." Another, "They moved me to the garage so the grandkids could have my room." And just like that, we weren't strangers anymore. We were survivors of quiet erasure, and now, writers of our own endings. I never told Caleb about the talk. I didn't need to. What mattered was that the words, once mine alone, were now shared, felt, respected. That's more than he had ever given me. One evening, as fall crept in and the basil began to wilt, I got a call from Freya. She'd just gotten off the phone with an old friend who still lived on Caleb's street. She said something weird, Freya told me. Said she saw Caleb crying in the driveway. Alone. Trash bins knocked over. No Bella, no car in the driveway. I didn't say anything right away. Then I asked, "Do you feel bad for him?" Freya was quiet. Then, "No. I just feel sad for the little boy you told me about." I nodded. So did I. But I didn't feel regret. There's a difference. Regret asks, should I have done more? Peace says, I did what I could, and I stopped when it became survival. That night, I wrote one more note in my journal. He had a mother who would have gone through fire. He chose to burn the bridge anyway, and now the ashes are his to keep. It started with a folding chair and a circle of strangers. Freya drove me to the church basement, where the women's support group met every Thursday. No name tags, no sign-in sheet, just a pot of weak coffee, a plate of saltines, and chairs arranged like survivors of the same storm. They didn't know my full story, not yet, but they could see it in my hands, the way they trembled slightly when I held the paper. They could hear it in my breath, the way I exhaled before speaking, as if preparing to relive something sacred. "My name's Eleanor," I began. "I used to believe my job was to take care of everyone, to give and give and give, until I disappeared." Some women nodded. Others looked down, holding their grief like a fragile teacup. I told them about the house, the manipulation, the basement, but I didn't tell it like a victim. I told it like a woman who walked out with more than they ever expected. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here to remember that I mattered, that I still do." Afterward, a woman named Luann came up to me. She was in her 70s, hair pinned up, lipstick slightly smudged, the way it always is when someone's been crying but doesn't want to admit it. "My daughter said I was too much drama," she whispered. "So I stopped visiting. Then I stopped calling. Now she says I'm cold. I can't win." I reached out and took her hand. "You're not too much," I said. "You're just finally expecting respect." She didn't say anything, just squeezed my hand like it was a lifeline. From that day, the group started inviting me every week, not as a guest, but as a voice. They asked me to share more stories, to write reflections they could read aloud. Some of them had never said the words, "he hurt me," before. Some had said it too many times and been told to move on. But in that room, none of us needed to be quiet. We weren't crazy. We weren't dramatic. We were women who had been erased and were slowly writing ourselves back in. Meanwhile, Caleb's world was collapsing in slow motion. Freya told me he'd been calling our old lawyer, trying to negotiate the return of certain assets. "I just want what's fair," he said. But fairness, for him, had always meant control. And when control was gone, so was the illusion of being a good son. Bella had moved back in with her sister. Lila was spending more time at friends' houses than at home. Their lawn was overgrown, mail stacked on the porch, the kind of slow decay that only happens when nobody cares enough to fix anything. One of the women from group, Janet, lived near Caleb's street. She told me she walked by sometimes just to see the house where the story began. "Looks like a shell now," she said. No warmth, just silence. I smiled, not out of spite, but because sometimes silence means freedom. Back at Freya's, I was working on a new essay for a community publication. The topic, quiet women who save themselves. I wanted it to be more than just my voice. So I started gathering quotes from the group, from online replies, even from letters women had sent to my P.O. box. One read, "They said I should be grateful I wasn't homeless, but being invisible inside your own home is a kind of homelessness too." Another, "My kids call me stubborn, I call it surviving." And another, "He said he'd put me in a home if I didn't behave." I reminded him it was my name on the deed. Before submitting the article, I paused, because I wanted to ask you, the one reading or listening, have you ever felt erased in your own family? What would you tell the woman you used to be before they made you feel like you didn't matter? You don't have to comment, but if you do, know this space is safe. You're not alone in what you've felt. I submitted the piece. A week later, the editor called. "I don't usually cry at my desk," she said, "but your story, it's not just yours, is it?" I said, "No, it's all of ours." She ran it as the feature. It reached more women than I could have imagined. Some wrote back, some forwarded it to friends, some just whispered to themselves, "That's me," and that was enough. At night, I sat on the porch with Jamie in my lap, watching fireflies. "Grandma, do bugs get sad?" he asked. "I think they do," I said, "but they keep glowing anyway." He looked up at me like I'd said something magical. Maybe I had. I didn't know what Caleb was doing anymore. I didn't ask. I wasn't angry. I wasn't curious. I was free. Free to care. Free to write. Free to grow older without shrinking into someone's shadow. They tried to lock me away on my birthday. Now I wake up to sunlight, to jam on toast, to stories that are mine to tell. And the best part? I'm just getting started. I didn't have to say his name. I never wrote Caleb in the article. Never once mentioned the house, the bank accounts, the power of attorney I had signed under pressure. But somehow, they knew. People close to him started piecing things together. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the fact that the woman they used to call Eleanor the Invisible was now Eleanor the Voice. One afternoon, Freya walked in holding a thick envelope. It was a letter, stamped with the seal of the State Office for Elder Welfare Review. "Is this what I think it is?" I asked. She nodded slowly. Caleb was being reviewed for potential elder abuse and financial coercion. I sat down, not shaken, not thrilled, just still. It had taken time. It had taken silence. But the truth, as it always does, had quietly grown roots. Later that week, Iris, my old attorney, called me. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "They reached out to me," she said. "He denied everything, said you were confused, unwell, said you'd been acting irrational for years." I let out a soft, sad laugh. "Did they believe him?" Iris paused. "They've seen the legal paperwork you had me file. They've seen your article. They saw how carefully you moved, without rage or scandal. They didn't believe him, Eleanor. They believed you. The thing about abusers, especially family ones, is that they think shame will keep you quiet, that if they erase your narrative, theirs will stand unchallenged. But when you reclaim your voice, even in whispers, the cracks begin to show, and Caleb's carefully curated image, dutiful son, loyal husband, devoted father, was starting to fall apart. I wasn't the one who told Lila the truth, but someone did. Maybe she read the story. Maybe Bella, in a rare moment of guilt, let something slip. Maybe children just know when love vanishes from the room and something cold takes its place. All I know is that one Saturday morning, there was a letter in my mailbox. The return address had no name. Inside was a piece of lined notebook paper written in a 12-year-old's scrawl. I remember your cookies. I remember your laugh. I remember when you brushed my hair and said I was smart. I hope you're okay. I still think about you. Elle. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because for the first time in a long time I felt seen by the very person they thought they had turned against me. Meanwhile, I kept showing up. To the Thursday night women's group, to book club at the library, to Jamie's school assembly where he shouted, "That's my grandma!" loud enough for the whole auditorium to hear. I didn't hide. And yet, I didn't seek the spotlight either. That's the beautiful thing about truth. Once you stop carrying the burden of being believed, you begin to feel lighter because you finally believed yourself. Word got out in the local community. Not gossip, not scandal, just awareness. People who once smiled politely at Caleb in the grocery store now looked away. Some didn't know what to say. Others didn't feel the need to say anything, because when someone starts losing the mask, the world doesn't always need an explanation. It just watches as they undo themselves. One afternoon, I ran into Miriam Lockhart again, the retired math teacher. She grabbed my hand and said, "I heard. I just want to say, thank you for not screaming." I looked at her. She added, "Because the way you've handled this, it reminds people like me that we can still hold our heads high, even after being humiliated." I squeezed her hand. "We don't need to scream," I said. "We just need to stand long enough for the silence to speak." And it did. Not as revenge, not as triumph, but as a slow, quiet unfolding, where everyone finally saw what I had lived through and what I had walked away from stronger. The knock came on a Tuesday. It wasn't loud. 3 soft raps, hesitant like the person behind the door wasn't sure if they wanted to be let in or turned away. I opened it, half expecting a neighbor or one of Jamie's little friends forgetting their lunchbox again. But there he was, Caleb. Standing in a navy jacket I didn't recognize, hair slightly grayer, face more tired than I'd ever seen. He didn't speak right away, just looked at me, eyes scanning my face like he was trying to find the version of me he once understood. "Mom," he said finally, "can we talk?" I didn't move. I didn't open the screen door, didn't invite him in. I simply said, "Talk about what?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I read some of the things you wrote. Not all of it, just enough." I waited. He continued. "I know I made some mistakes. Things got out of hand, but it was never supposed to go that far. Bella, well, you know how she gets, and I was under a lot of pressure." I almost smiled. Almost. There it was again. The passive apology. The kind that looks like guilt from the outside, but is really just damage control. "You didn't come to apologize," I said. "You came to see how much damage was done, Taume." He looked startled, as if I had slapped him with my words. "Mom, that's not fair." "No," I said. "It's not, but it's true." He looked down at his shoes. They were worn, not like before, when everything he wore had a label and polish. I noticed the thread on his coat cuff, coming undone. "What do you want, Caleb?" His voice dropped. I want to make things right." And that's when I finally opened the screen door, only slightly, not to invite him in, but to look him in the eye, without a barrier between us. "Making things right doesn't start when your comfort is threatened," I said. "It starts when the person you harmed is still bleeding, and you kneel beside them without asking to be forgiven." He opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand gently. I don't hate you. That's what you came to check, isn't it? Silence. You want to know if I've moved on, if I still talk about you, if I've told the world you're a monster. But Caleb, my silence isn't mercy. It's peace. And you don't get to take that from me, too. He blinked, tears welling, but not falling. I just want to see Lila, he said. She asks about you. She doesn't understand any of it. She's a child, I said, and she will grow up to understand whether or not she forgives you. That's between you and her. And you? I took a deep breath. I forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, but for me. He nodded slowly, the weight of it landing on his shoulders. I guess that's it then, he said, backing up toward the walkway. You're really not coming back. I shook my head gently. I'm not the one who left, Caleb. I was pushed out. As he walked away, something strange happened. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt whole. Because for once, I hadn't begged to be heard. I didn't plead for understanding. I didn't hope for a better version of him to show up. And that clarity, that stillness inside me, was worth more than any apology he could offer. That night, Freya asked if I was okay. I said, I didn't need him to regret it. I just needed to know I wouldn't waver if he showed up. And I hadn't. Later, as I sat at my desk, I opened my journal. He came with a knock, not a scream, with a face that said, what happened, instead of, I'm sorry. And I met him with a door that stayed closed, not out of anger, but because I finally knew the difference between guilt and growth. The first breeze of spring came early that year. It drifted in through the cracked window of my reading nook, carrying the scent of magnolia from the neighbor's tree. Jamie had just gone home with Freya, chattering about some art project he'd made out of bottle caps and yarn. I sat alone in the quiet house I now called mine, not because it was written under my name, but because it carried my spirit in every corner. The soft chair in the living room? Mine. The spoon rest shaped like a cat? Mine. The garden out front, blooming wild and unruly? Also mine. For the first time in years, everything around me reflected who I was, without needing to ask permission to exist. I'd almost forgotten about the old mailbox by the gate. We hardly used it anymore. Most things came digitally now. But that day, I checked it, out of habit. Inside was a single envelope, no return address, just 3 words handwritten on the back, for Eleanor Holloway. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was shaky. It wasn't Caleb's. It was Bella's. Eleanor, I used to think strength meant silence, that keeping the house running, staying presentable, never asking questions, that made me good. That made me better. But the day we locked that basement door, I stopped being anything good. I became small. Lila saw through me. She saw the coward I had become. She asked where you went, and I lied. I didn't lie for her. I lied for myself. I saw your story. And the strange thing is, I thought you'd want to humiliate us, but you didn't. You just told the truth, and somehow it made me want to tell mine. I'm not writing to make peace. I don't deserve it. I'm just writing to say, you were the light in that house, and we tried to live without it, but nothing ever felt warm again. Bella. I stood still, letter in hand. I didn't cry, didn't feel pity, didn't feel vindicated either. Just understood. In a way I never expected. Later that week, I walked into the grocery store, my usual place for solitude and free samples. As I turned the corner of the produce aisle, I heard a familiar voice call out, Mrs. Holloway? It was Miriam Lockhart again, always with perfect timing, that woman. She waved me over and held out a magazine. You're on the back page. It was the latest issue of the Community Journal. My piece had been picked for their Voices That Matter column. There was no photo of me, just the final lines of my essay in big, bold print. They said I was too old to start over, too quiet to make a difference. But I learned that silence isn't weakness. It's where strength gathers its breath. And when I finally spoke, I did not raise my voice. I simply reclaimed it. Back home, I clipped the page and tucked it into my kitchen cabinet, just behind the flower, not for display, just for safekeeping. Because while the world now knew what I had survived, I no longer needed their approval to feel worthy. A few days later, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Freya and Jamie carrying a small box tied in string. "For you," she said. I opened it. Inside was a stack of thank you cards, from women in the support group, from readers, from neighbors I barely knew. One simply read, "You made me feel seen." Another, "I didn't leave my room for weeks. Then I read your story. Now I take my coffee on the porch again." And one more, "I showed my daughter your piece. She said, I hope I never make you feel that way." It changed us. And there it was, recognition. Not in headlines or courtroom victories, but in lives quietly reconnected, souls quietly mended. They never gave me a parade, never carved my name into a plaque. But the women who once whispered their pain now stood taller in grocery aisles and church pews. And somewhere, maybe, a little girl named Lila still remembered my laugh. That was enough. I spent the rest of that afternoon in the garden, planting sweet peas by the fence. They don't bloom right away, but when they do, they climb. They hold on. They stretch toward the light with no fear, just like we do. If you've made it all the way to the end, maybe you know someone like Eleanor, or maybe you are someone like her, someone who gave and gave until there was almost nothing left for yourself. Someone who stayed quiet not because you had nothing to say, but because no one seemed ready to listen. But here, right now, you are seen, and you are not alone. So I want to ask you, from one quiet survivor to another, if you truly believed your life still had room to bloom, what would you grow? Would it be peace? Freedom? A second chance at something just for you? If you're comfortable, share it in the comments. Because your story, your small, silent dream, might be the seed someone else has been waiting to see planted. Thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for being here. You mattered all along. Now let the world feel it too.